Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the RMC. We're happy that you're with us. I'm Sandy Wolf from the Delaware T-Square Center, and I'm here to introduce Tony DeCresie from the Virginia LTAP Center. Tony brings a very diverse and extensive background spanning numerous industries and businesses working with both public and private entities. He is a nationally recognized and awarded training manager with several different organizations over the past 25 years. Tony's primary area of focus revolves around transportation, highway and road work, site safety training, and heavy equipment operations safety. Take it away, Tony.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Okay. And I'm trying to, there we go. Okay. And just by the way, I'm down here in Florida. Some of you are already experienced. I got to talk to a couple of our friends in Oklahoma. Ice storms yesterday. Winter's on its way, guys. So our topic of discussion is appropriate for today: winter road maintenance and snow operations. And just so you know, even though I'm in Florida, I've spent lots of time up north, spent a couple of years in South Dakota, plenty of snow and ice there. The last 5 years, I've been traveling the state of Virginia and working with Virginia DOT and local city and county employees on winter road maintenance and snow operations. I was the director of the Road Scholar Certification Program for federal highways out in Oklahoma in 2018 and 19, focusing on roadway maintenance, heavy equipment operations, and roadway safety. So I'm hoping that we can all learn a little bit today. I'm hoping I can get some feedback from you guys. And in order to get the most out of our brief training session today, it helps me know a little bit about you. Now, since we're not directly interacting, I think we've set up a little series of polling questions. And there I see something popping up on the screen. If you tell me a little bit about what part of the country you're from, what type of organization you're a part of, city, county, DOT, whatever, what your primary job title is, and what you're responsible for during winter road maintenance and snow operations. Are you a snowplow driver? Are you fleet maintenance, operations management? Kind of helps me get a feel for the group. And Sandy, if you can kind of tally up those things and give me an idea. As an example, last week I was in Arlington, Virginia for 3 days training on winter road maintenance. And in one of the training sessions, it was 95% snowplow drivers. So we focused on, out in the field, snowplow operations for a good portion of the day-long training. But I have sometimes when I'll have directors, operations managers, snow commanders, a good percentage of them in the group, and we'll focus a little bit more on operations management. So again, it helps me to get a feel for what you do, what you're involved in when we're talking about winter road maintenance. Okay, we got.
Yeah. So Tony, we're going to do a poll individually. So here's the results on the screen now for where the majority of the people are coming from.
Okay. All right. So heavily in the Northeast. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm going to launch the next poll.
Great.
Type of organizations.
Okay. All right, nice little smattering. City and municipality, about 30 of you. A few more popping in there. Some DOT folks, some county folks. A few of you from university, and even a few from private industry. Okay, great.
Okay, and I'm going to go to the next question. We're going to go to primary responsibilities.
Okay. This is what I'm really interested to see, what you guys do with regards to winter road maintenance and snow operations. Oh, we got a lot of others, a lot of operations management. Okay. All right. Very few front end. See, this is good to know. Again, last week, heavy on the people on the front lines, heavy equipment operator, snowplow, lots of operations management. Some crew leaders and some field supervisors, a few folks that push snow, and a bunch of others. wouldn't mind knowing if you have a chance in the chat box. We got quite a few people that designate themselves as other. If you wouldn't mind, when you get a chance, pop in the chat box and say what exactly your job title is if it didn't fit in any of those categories. Okay. And then are we on to the final question yet?
Yep. This is
Okay.
what are your primary responsibilities?
Okay. Primary responsibilities. Okay. Well, this is going to be good. It looks like we have a predominant group of operation management people. So you guys will like what we're going to focus on today. All right. Some people into snow plowing, anti-icing, de-icing of roads. Some folks doing some ordering and maintaining of supplies, some field supervision. Good.
Okay, does that give you a good idea, Tony?
Okay, that's great. So we got the highest group is operations management. And we got quite a few people, double digits in field supervision. So, okay, perfect, perfect. I appreciate the feedback. Let's go ahead and move on with the program.
Okay, if it's still on your screen, just exit out.
Okay, I can go ahead and exit out of that. Okay, great.
All right, it's all over to you.
All right, so I appreciate the feedback. Here's what I expect from you. I'm going to give you, try and make it so you guys can take away some good stuff from today. But questions are encouraged at any time. So either raise your hand or put something in the chat box, or just unmute yourself and chat and shout out if you'd like. Best time to ask a question is when it pops in your head. And this is not learning by lecture. We've got a wealth of experience here in this group, as is evident by those polling questions. So I would appreciate feedback from everybody. I'd like participation, input, ideas. Some of the things I use in my regular full-day training program are the result of feedback and information and ideas we've gotten when we've had group training sessions. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to ask that each of you share some kind of a tip or some knowledge from a past experience, share something you learned today, or ask a question related to winter road maintenance. So be thinking about what you're going to share at the end. I think we're going to have 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions and feedback. Fair enough? All right, let's get started. So winter road maintenance and all the things involved to do it properly. And these are the things that we usually cover in our full day training. We talk about snow and ice control. We get into the strategies, techniques, procedures, off-season planning, preparation, and preventative maintenance. Anti-icing and de-icing, both the techniques and the substances that are used, the procedures, the process. We talk about snow fighting equipment, what's being used, when to use it, and how to use it effectively. And then finally, I always try and cover something on safety. And when our people are working in difficult conditions, which winter road maintenance typically is, it's always important that we have an emphasis on safety. So our focus today, though, is going to be on off-season planning, preparation, and preventive maintenance. So those of you that are in operations management, fleet maintenance, those kind of things, field supervision, I think this will be perfect. So winter road maintenance. Let's talk about what is our primary goal or mission when we're doing winter road maintenance. Jeremy, throw something in the chat box or unmute yourself and share your thoughts. What is it we're trying to accomplish?
Safety is what we're at in the chat box.
Okay. What else we got in there?
Passable roads, preparation.
Okay. Got a few things here. Provide passable roads. I like that. Great. Okay. Good feedback from everybody. Good feedback. Now, what are some of the... Go ahead. Somebody had a comment?
Typing in resident safety, provide safety, coming in quick.
Okay. Well, I think some of the biggest responses that I saw there in the chat box, and I would agree, our idea is to get the roads passable. Not always possible to get them down to the bare road all the time, but make the roads passable and safe for the traveling public. Those are oftentimes are two of the main goals that we're doing. There's a lot of things that get involved in doing that. But what are some of the biggest challenges we have to accomplishing our goals of winter road maintenance and snow and ice control and keeping those roads passable and safe for the traveling public? Share your thoughts on that. Let me get some other comments in the chat box, or unmute yourself and just shout out. Okay. Time, traffic, citizens on the road, people get in the way. Okay. Narrow streets, higher traffic volume, impatient drivers. There's somebody who's actually worked a snowplow before. Notice of impending storms, asset management, labor, materials, time. We're going to get into that quite a bit today. Good. Okay, gravel roads. Okay. The rate of the snow, the weather itself. Yeah. Limited personnel, equipment, materials, right? Available resources. Yeah. We don't have unlimited resources. Not enough time, not enough people, not enough equipment sometimes. Accurate weather forecasting. This is something we cover in our full day class, the best sources for accurate weather. And that is a challenge for many people in many places. So it's important to make sure you have good, accurate resources for weather forecasting. Great. On-street parking. Wonderful. Yeah. People parking when they're not supposed to, where they're not supposed to. That makes it challenging. Good. Great feedback. Great feedback. Well, I'm hoping that over the course of the day, we're going to talk about how to overcome some of those things. But whether you're with a DOT district or a local community, municipality, public works, roads department, you probably have a written policy for your winter road maintenance and your snow and ice control that reads something like this. We should plan for and attempt to promptly and efficiently treat and remove snow and ice from all our highways and roadways, or make them passable as soon as possible. This is considered an emergency activity and is intended to maintain roadway assets while ensuring the safety of the traveling public and year-round use of our highways or local roadways without any undue delays. And again, I think the key things, and you probably, that sounds familiar because probably every organization I've ever worked with has something similar sounding. Key things, we're trying to make the roadways passable. Available resources. We oftentimes, no matter what kind of organization we come from, don't have enough people, don't have all the equipment we'd like to have, and don't have the time. And the weather sometimes makes it difficult. So primary goal is not necessarily bare roads, but to make sure they're passable. And down below there highlighted, safe as possible for the traffic, for the traveling public. Keep the traffic moving, keep it moving safely. And one of the other considerations here is that our people need to understand that this is an emergency activity. This is not regular roadway maintenance. This is not street sweeping. This is not every few months trimming back the trees and the bushes so they don't block the roadway signs. This is an emergency activity, and in order for it to go smoothly and efficiently and safely, there are a lot of things involved that we have to make sure we're doing. And for those of you in operations management, of which the majority are here, and field supervision, it takes planning, it takes prioritization. Again, because we have limited resources, we got to make sure that we're utilizing those resources effectively. And so we have to prioritize all the various routes that we're going to be working and clearing snow and ice from. Understanding that we only have so many people, so many trucks, so much material built up, and so much time when there is a winter storm event. The purpose of these activities is to identify and designate snow and ice control levels that are both efficient and attainable. Doesn't do us any good to set goals that we can't reach. Again, you got to remember you've got certain available resources to work with. So we're designating priorities. So let me ask you again, another feedback here, type in the chat line or just shout out, which roadways do you work to de-ice and remove snow from first in your particular area? What are your priority 1 locations? Let's see what we got here. Main roads, state roads, hills, bridges, right? Bridges are icing up first. State roads, interstates. If you've got an interstate in your area you're responsible for, DOT, or a municipality that has interstate or state highways running through, great. Hospital access routes, great. It's not always just the volume of that particular road. Other locations that have nothing to do with traffic, hospitals, very good, okay. Police departments, fire departments. So emergency response personnel and locations. Okay, great. So you probably got your list of priority 1 locations, national highway systems, interstates, and those select primary and secondary roads that typically have the most traffic. And then again, those locations, again, typically like emergency response, hospitals, and occasionally I've heard from, boy, we better clear the snow out in front of the mayor's house or we're never going to hear the end of it, or the county commissioner that's responsible for your county. I know that seems kind of trivial, but I've had some people swear by that they better make sure the snow is cleared away from certain locations that others might not consider priority 1. So each area, it's really specific to your particular needs and your available resources. During some snow events, for example, we had a news report that I use in one of our training sessions, and they talked to a VDOT snowplow driver, and it was during one of the heaviest snowstorms that they'd had in years. And he was talking about the fact that they never made it away from the priority 1 locations for several days because it never stopped snowing. And typically you don't move to a priority 2 or 3 location if there's still ice and snow building up on the primary or those priority 1 locations. So that's typically what you're going to do in your planning. The priority 1s, they're designated that way for a reason, because if you don't take care of those and keep them clear, passable, and safe for the traveling public, doesn't matter what you do with those priority 2, priority 3, and priority 4. You know, you're not going to get to the little neighborhoods. You're not going to be, clearing snow from the cul-de-sacs, and you sure aren't going to get to some location out in the boonies. If you live in some place like this, you better have your own snowplow, or one of your neighbors better, or you're going to be hanging out for a few days and with nowhere to go. So again, but that's just the way it works. In Virginia, for example, where I do most of my training, on a yearly basis. And this time of year, that final prep before the snows come, we talk about the fact that many of those locations only have a few snow events every year, 2 or 3 on average. In fact, last year, in some parts of Virginia, they never brought out the snow clearing equipment at all. And when that's the case, you cannot afford to build up enough people, enough trucks, enough supplies for the occasional heavy winter storm. So that case, you've got to have things like outside contractors, subcontractors ready to go. And so we'll talk a little bit about how you get prepared in the off season for that occasional big or long snow event that on a typical winter season, you could never have or maintain the resources because it just isn't cost effective. You can't put enough money and people towards the occasional winter road maintenance type of event. So everybody, if you're in operations management, this stuff is going to look very familiar. You're prioritizing your routes. You're talking about what the requirements are to service those routes. And you probably are determining, well, if it's less than 2 inches of snow, for example, a lot of places don't do anything. They won't send out their trucks. They won't pre-treat the roads, or at least they won't send out sand and salt. And we'll talk about some of those things, what you use, what's not being used, some of the new things. But you probably have charts that look something like this. Again, in operations management, you're trying to figure out, okay, I got so many resources. I got so many tons of sand, so many tons of salt. I got so many trucks, so many spreaders, so many plows, so many drivers. And, you know, how are we going to handle this? What time frame? Do we want this accomplished in 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours? What is reasonable? So again, those attainable goals, you could hope it would be nice to get all the snow and ice cleared from all the roads within 6 hours after a snowstorm, but that's not really realistic in most places, and those kind of goals aren't attainable. So it's making sure that with whatever available resources you have, you've got a good plan, and you're organized in the off season. So these are things like, these are the goals. This is what we're trying to attain. How do we accomplish these targeted levels of services? What does it take to make this happen? Well, and that's what today is all about. And we're only going to be able to touch on it briefly, but we're going to hit the highlights. And then again, if you do this in like a full day program, and you can get into much more detail, but let's talk a little bit more about the critical things for off-season planning, preparation, and preventive maintenance. So let's share our thoughts. What can and should be done before the snow and ice arrives to be better prepared? So what are some of the things that your organization does in the off season to be prepared? So again, put it in the chat box. If you prefer talking instead of typing, feel free to unmute yourself and shout out. We'll give you a minute to go ahead and give your feedback.
It says test and maintain equipment before the snow. Tell the public what to expect, those expectations. Check all equipment, maintain equipment. Train rookie plowers.
That's important. Maintain equipment, check all the equipment.
All right.
Calibrate spreaders. Okay, good. Stockpile materials. Good. Great. Equipment dry run in the falls. We'll talk about that. Excellent. Check routes for new obstacles. Very good. Very good. Okay, review checklist, check equipment. Contractors, bring tractor to community, has chains on it. Training of employees. All right. Good. Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, a lot involved in off-season planning and preparation. Critical things. If you want your winter road operations and snow and ice control activities to go smoothly, it is critical that you have a solid off-season planning and preparation and preventive maintenance program. So we'll talk about some of those things. So snow readiness, making sure your crew, your resources are ready to go for roadway maintenance during the winter season. And snow readiness is a year-round program. It involves inspection of and preventive maintenance for all your department and contractor snow-related equipment, as well as employee assignments and familiarity with their snow and ice control operation. The program also includes annual dry run practice training. Someone suggested that. The purpose of off-season planning, preparation, and maintenance. Again, you probably have something that reads like this. Your mission statement is to assure the availability and reliability of all the equipment you need and all the materials you're going to need, as well as familiarity of state and local forces and your contract employees, people that are in reserve, with their assignments in order to achieve the objective of providing effective roadway snow and ice control services. So again, most of your organizations probably have a statement that reads something like that. So let's break this down. Let's really dig into it and see what all's involved with that. So when you get to it, what is annual preparation? Well, there's certain specific and ongoing activities that facilitate our ability to respond to emergencies. And again, we talked about that earlier. This is an emergency activity, not regular maintenance. It involves training. It involves equipment readiness. It involves supplies. It involves personnel and coordination with support agencies and outside organizations that you may contract with to provide services that you internally may not be able to do. So specifically, what's involved? Certain things that are ongoing, things like maintaining your list of resources, all the things you're going to need to have available and handy when bad winter weather hits and the roads start icing up. Reviewing of plans, like your snow and ice plan. Okay, how are we going to do what needs to be done? Updating obstacles on the snow routes. A couple people put that. Things like, and some folks may not even have a clue of this if you haven't been involved in snowplow operations, but it is quite a jarring experience to find unexpectedly an elevated manhole cover. I mean, that can do serious damage to a snowplow. And some of them, most of them are flush with the road, but every so often there's one that's just a few inches elevated. And if your plow blade is low to the ground, boom. Things like steel plates that are typically used when there's roadway construction. Easy to see before the snow, but if there's a few inches of snow on the ground and you haven't had your snowplow drivers running those routes in good weather, summer or fall, and make a note of that, that's kind of not a good thing to find accidentally. So making notes. Now, in some cases, you might have maps and they're manually making notes. Many of you may be utilizing GIS and GPS technology, putting those little pins on places. Here's a fire hydrant. Here's an island. Again, elevated manhole covers, roadway construction areas. So if you've got that, that's great. But one way or another, make sure people are driving the routes and getting familiar with potential obstacles that will not be easy to see when there is snow on the road. Training personnel. You got to make sure your people are trained and they know what to do, what you want them to do, how to do it, when to do it, and how to do it safely. It's like you're a football fan. Some of your favorite football teams this year, at the beginning of the season, the first few games at NFL, may not have looked as sharp as they might otherwise because of COVID. There was no off-season workouts. There was no mini camps. They didn't have preseason games. So in some cases, they were 3 or 4 games into the season, which would have normally been practice time, preseason games that didn't matter, and they're into the season. So just like a professional athlete in any sport that is practicing, drilling, rehearsing constantly so they're sharp when it matters, you've got to make sure your people are trained on all the things that are important that they're going to need to do. And there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot that needs to be done properly, or you're going to have problems. So training personnel is very important. Being familiar with your contracts and your subcontractors, what you can count on them for and what maybe you can't count on them for. I've had people that have attended my training sessions that said, well, hey, I go to my subcontractors, I want you to do this. I'd like them to come in and participate with us in training. They say, no, not in my contract. Or I'd like them during a snow event to do certain things in certain places. Nope, not in my contract. We've talked about things like, well, those contracts come due every so often. And if you don't if you're not happy with your subcontractors and they're using it as an excuse, well, it's not in my contract, then you better make sure you're actively involved in the restructuring and renegotiating of those future contracts. But you got to be familiar with what you have in reserve for those events that you don't have enough people and enough equipment. So you know what to count on and what you can't count on. And then again, your own personnel resources. So it's not just you got to train them, but you also know who's available, who's going to work the first shift, who's going to work the second shift. You don't just have people showing up on those 12-hour shifts. That takes some planning and preparation and understanding. And then there's events like a Snow Fighters Challenge, or what a lot of people would refer to as a rodeo, for example, and things like dry run events, where kind of an all hands on deck, everyone participates like we have an impending storm coming up. So these are all specific things that are involved in the off-season planning and preparation to make sure that your winter road maintenance and snow and ice control operations go smoothly and effectively. All right, let's take a quick survey. Does your organization have an annual Snow Fighters Challenge, or what many people may call a rodeo, where the heavy equipment operators and the snow plow drivers are actually going through a competition and practicing skills and getting awards? So raise your hand or answer yes in the chat box if you do. And let's just kind of take a little
Just
survey.
a heads up, Tony. Just a heads up, we got about 18 minutes.
Okay. No, 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 no. Yes, a rodeo. Okay. Few yeses, a lot of no's. Well, let me encourage you. If you don't have in your organization something like a Snow Fighters Challenge, now, for example, in Virginia and a few of the other DOTs, statewide DOTs have this regularly, and they're usually some of the best prepared. I highly encourage it. Competition keeps them sharp in the off season. Some event that gets them practicing so that they don't just show up. It's hard to be good and effective at doing something if you only do it once or twice or 3 times a year, and you'll go 8 or 9 months or sometimes 10 months in between when you have to do it. So if you're not doing a Snow Fighters Challenge or some kind of a rodeo with your heavy equipment operators and snowplow operators, I highly encourage you to get with whoever's responsible for that and try and make that happen. Now, another quick survey. Who has never seen one or participated in one and doesn't know what they're all about? Even if you haven't participated in one or your crew doesn't have one. So raise your hand, type no if you've never participated or you've never even seen one of these in action. I'm just curious. Okay, we've done a rodeo. No. Okay, again, a lot of people in operations. All right, get with your field supervisors, get with whoever's maybe has the title Snow Commander in your organization. Again, this is just simply in the off season, like this time of year, sometimes even in the summertime, where you get everybody together and you make them go through the motions of doing the things they're going to have to do when there's snow and ice on the road, but practicing it when the conditions are nice. Again, practice makes perfect. Preparation. It is hard to do anything really well if you don't practice it. So let me encourage you in your organization to get involved and encourage that with whoever the decision makers are. Okay, so we just talked about that. Dry runs. Now, whether or not your organization does a Snow Fighters Challenge or a rodeo or not, every organization should be doing dry runs. Now, who can tell me what a dry run is, or just pop in the chat box there what you think your definition of dry run. There was a couple people that said you do them. Okay. Or some cases, okay. Run your route before the first event. Yeah, seen them. Okay. And many of you running the route in good weather. Okay. Yeah, so even if there's not a competition that you're doing for the people that are on the front lines, a dry run, this is kind of where it all comes together. They're usually conducted in the fall, right around this time. It's kind of an all hands on deck training event. So it's not just the people that are pushing snow, scraping the roads. It's not just the people that are spreading and putting out sand and salt and whatever kind of chemicals or that you're maybe using to melt the ice with. It's dispatchers, it's maintenance personnel, it's everybody involved to make sure that when there's a true snow and ice event that everything goes effectively. It's imminent snowstorm preparations. You're operating and testing all the snow and ice equipment, you're checking safety devices, making sure the communication stuff is working properly, and cleaning and greasing and calibrating all the equipment. This is where you've got your folks driving the routes, checking for those obstacles that will not be easily seen when it's in the middle of the winter time and there's snow on the ground. You're checking your supplies for availability. Do I have enough sand? Do I have enough salt? And whatever else you might need. Do I have enough replacement parts? The typical things that I use a lot of: headlights, spark plugs, tires, chains, windshield wipers that you're constantly replacing when you're in the middle of winter snow operations. You're validating your dry run checklist. You're reviewing your contracts. You're checking with your subcontractors, getting ready. You usually have a dry run checklist that may look something like this. And you're involved in that preventive maintenance. You know, what needs to be done in the off season and in between the snow and ice events during the season. Proper preventive maintenance of all your equipment should be a routine occurrence. You got to make sure that everything is maintained year round. You can't shut down the brine making equipment and let it sit there for 10 months and then expect that everything's going to work perfect when you go to use it. You know, and for example, some of this equipment you think maybe is only going to be used once a year or twice a year. You know, dump trucks and spreaders, you might have a hazmat incident and you might use that same setup or very similar to what you're using during winter months. So it's important to have all of this stuff cleaned and lubricated and prepped and inspected on a regular basis, not just, you know, a day before or the day of you're getting ready to use it for your winter road maintenance operations. And then once you get into the winter road maintenance operations, you know, you're working 12-hour shifts. Guys are working, you know, constantly. And if you've got a big snow event and temperatures stay below freezing for several days, you've got your people are working more. They're working those longer shifts, but your equipment is working nonstop. You'll have one driver, for example, come in after a 12-hour shift, and there may be a really short time that truck's sitting there reloading and doing whatever you're doing, and then another driver's going out for 12 hours. So you've got this equipment that is used very infrequently sometimes in the off season, and now is being used 24/7, maybe several days in a row. So the importance of not only that preventive maintenance in the off season, but squeezing in the cleaning and the lubricating during or in between shifts, for example, you know, salt and sand getting in between pins and bushings. You can do some serious damage, short-term and long-term, if you're not properly cleaning and greasing and washing down your equipment. Now, what are some of the challenges that we have with this? Well, I had some folks say, hey, we're shorthanded. We have, you know, some of the smaller municipalities, for example, might only have 1 or 2 maintenance people. And I've had situations say, we just don't have enough, you know, people. I got 10 trucks, 12 trucks, 15 trucks out there, and I got 1 maintenance guy that's available. So as an example, what one of the organizations did is they staggered their shifts to help out their own maintenance crew. They had the incoming drivers come in 15 minutes early. They had the outgoing drivers stay 15 minutes later, and they were both responsible for thoroughly inspecting those trucks in between the shifts and cleaning and lubricating along with maintenance to resolve those issues. So again, sometimes with available resources being scarce, sometimes we have to get creative, and it helps to have your people involved. So spreaders got to be completely cleaned and lubricated at the end of the snow season. They got to be ready. You should be storing these things in places that aren't sitting out in the elements, so they're not rusting up in between. All the equipment. And then calibration of your spreaders. This is a kind of a unique thing. Properly calibrated spreaders to ensure that you have the right application rates for all the different materials and mixtures used, sand and salt, or other things you might mix in. And making sure that people know how to do that. And this is kind of a lost art. So again, another quick survey. Who in the audience knows how to calibrate a spreader? Raise your hand, make a note in the chat box, yes or no, if you know how to actually do it, or maybe have actually even done it before. Just curious. Most of my training classes usually isn't more than 1 or 2 out there that have done it. No, couple yeses. So absolutely good. Okay. We've done it, but don't do it every year. Okay, no. Yes, but drivers fight it. Okay. All right. No, do you need to do it every year? Okay, that's a good question. All right. Well, the answer is, yeah, you should do it every year. Here's the thing. And why is it important to do it in the off season? And should you do it every year in the off season? Well, because properly calibrated spreaders ensure you get the desired application rates. And each spreader, even if it's the same make and model, will often have slightly different disbursement rates of material per lane mile. Now, you guys in operations management, for example, you have to have a pretty good idea of what your spreaders, your fleet, and sometimes you might be dealing with 10, 15, 20, 25 if you're in larger organizations, sometimes even more. And it makes a big difference on how much sand and salt and other materials you might have to stockpile based on what the disbursement rate per mile is for your various spreaders. And the older a spreader gets, it will change. What it did when it was brand new is not the same thing it's going to do when it's 3 or 4 or 5 years old. There's different settings, there are different miles per hour. So it is important, I believe, to calibrate your spreaders, have somebody that understands how to do that properly every year in the off season to make sure that you know what the disbursement or discharge rate is per revolution and at the various settings. And then, you have to also understand, and they have to understand what the average speed is that your dump trucks or trucks that are dispersing this are traveling. This is critical information so you know how much sand and salt to keep in stock. On average, again, it varies depending on every year. You have a different level of snow, but most of you probably keep records of what the average is over the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So it's important to know what the average disbursement rate per lane mile is for your fleet of spreaders. So, and I think that should be done every year. So make sure somebody, and hopefully a few people, know how to do that. Materials to keep on hand. You got to make sure you got sand and salt brine for pre-treating, and the other chemicals that you might utilize, calcium chloride, magnesium, and maybe some new innovative things. And here's one of them. And oops, my sound is not playing. Hang on one moment here. Let me fix this if I can. Bear with me for a second. Somehow I thought I turned that back on. Okay, let's try again.
It always amazes me that no matter how covered in snow and ice a municipality is, when I get to the thruway, or I-87, the road is surprisingly clear.
Prior to a storm event, we'll put liquid salt brine and beet juice, the mixture, down directly on the road as a liquid application. And it acts to jumpstart the salt in the melting process. 2, it acts to reduce the bounce and the scatter of the salt as it comes out of the spinner and hits the road.
Michael Loftus is acting director for the Albany division of the New York State Thruway Authority. He said they've been using a special beet brine mixture to pre-treat and de-ice the roads for 3 years now.
It makes the salt brine more effective at lower temperatures than salt brine alone.
The magic mixture is 80% traditional brine, or salt water, and 20% beet juice. But these aren't the beets you're thinking of. The juice is actually an organic extract from the white, not red, sugar beet. Beets traditionally grown and harvested for their sugar create a liquid extract that's now patented and solely distributed under the name Ice Bite by a company called Road Solutions. Jay Wallerstein, the company's vice president of sales and marketing, says the extracted liquid is actually brown in color. When added to brine, it breaks the bond between snow, ice, and the pavement, making removal easier. He likens it to the difference between cooking your eggs in a Teflon or iron skillet.
You would have a real mess trying to clean that old metal skillet at the end. But if you were making them in a Teflon-coated pan, it would, you'd probably be able to slide the eggs right out. That's what Ice Bite does when it ends up on the road. It puts an invisible coating of anti-icing solids on the road.
The beet treatment will stick to the road as long as 4 days after spreading, lessening the need for further applications and saving the thruway money. Sugar beets. Who knew? In Albany, I'm Jenna Flanagan for the Innovation Trail.
Sugar beets. Who knew?
It always.
Another thing we need to be doing in the off season is looking for better ways to do things. 4 or 5 years ago, started researching other treatments for pre-treating roads. One of the reasons why a lot of organizations now, more and more, each and every year that I make the rounds and do training, are pre-treating roads with brine solution, is because it helps kind of that anti-icing, trying to keep the roads from freezing up to begin with, is safer. It's more cost effective. and it's to use up less materials. I mean, it's just there's very little cleanup. You don't have to use as much sand or salt during snow events. And there's a wealth of organic and biodegradable and environmentally friendly chemicals and compounds now, like beet juice or variations of it, that will actually bring the melting point down even further than just plain old brine or salt solutions. And they last longer. Now, one of the reasons, again, brine will sometimes last as long as 2 to 3 days with varying factors. It depends. But they found that, well, adding beet juice in about a 20 to 25% mixture with the brine, it would last up to 4 days. So it gets that coating on the roads. I've got some people that swear by it, swear that the snow and ice comes up easier when they are plowing and that it's less likely to form. I've also had some people that didn't like it that much. Smell complains. There are variations. There's the original, and then there's a whole bunch of generics out there too. So you kind of have to be careful. But in the off season, this is another thing you should be doing: researching other available and things that you can use. AMP, that's another one. I had one of our organizations that started with beet juice. They thought it was a little too thick. It clogged up their sprayers. They went to AMP, had similar properties, kind of put that coating on the road, lasted longer than just the salt brine mixture, created a lower freeze point, and they like it better. So in the off season, operation managers research. There's a lot, dozens and dozens and dozens of new treatments, things that you can add to your salt brine mix to make the job of your winter road maintenance and snow and ice control easier, more cost effective, and environmentally friendly. Yes.
So we have about 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and finish up here. Again, last thing I wanted to cover briefly, personnel training, more specifically safety training. I think it's critical. You got, again, the whole main goal here is keeping the road safe and passable for the traveling public in bad weather, winter weather. This can be both challenging and dangerous for even the best trained and most experienced operators, but for inexperienced employees or the ones that aren't trained properly or consistently working in winter weather conditions can be disastrous and even deadly. There are a lot of bad things that happen during winter road maintenance. So you want to make sure everyone knows not just what to do, but how to do it, and especially how to do it safely. So making sure, do your people know how to do all the different things that need to be done. Snowplow operators, let me encourage you to do, again, these dry run events and these rodeos and significant training, things that a single truck driver with a plow, how do they handle a 4-lane highway with an island? Where do they start? Which way do they push the snow? If they're part of a 2 truck plow team, what's different? What if there's no island? Anything different? How do they handle plowing snow on a bridge? What are the primary concerns? These are all things you got to address in the off season with your people, and making sure that your people know the proper speed at which to plow. So what is the proper speed to plow? Some folks will say, well, it's typically 25 miles per hour or less. I like to teach my people, hey, it's slow. You want to go slow. Slow is always better when you're plowing. So again, make sure you're emphasizing critically pedestrians, watching out for pedestrians. This is a critical thing, and that your people are trained to maximize and focus on being safe and not doing things that are going to put them or the traveling public at risk.